The scent of spiced ham and my father's disapproval hung in the air as I stepped into our family's mountain lodge on Christmas Eve 2022. I wore a deep burgundy turtleneck and tailored slacks discreetly tucked away where my image-conscious family wouldn't notice. Evelyn decided to join us after all, my older brother Marcus announced from the stone fireplace, his voice soaked in mock surprise. He sat sprawled in the leather armchair he'd boasted about importing from Italy, his wife Claire leaning against him, nodding in smug approval. "Flight delays," I said simply, setting down a canvas tote with modestly wrapped packages. No point mentioning that the flight delay was actually a last-minute negotiation session that secured a $420 million acquisition deal for my company in London. Let them keep believing I was still the barely-getting-by business consultant they liked to pity. My stepmother, Patricia, emerged from the open kitchen, her gaze sweeping over my understated outfit and small gold stud earrings. "You really should have let me help you pick something festive," she said, her voice syrupy. "Marcus's wife has such a great eye for style. That boutique downtown is having incredible sales." I bit back a grin, thinking about the custom gowns hanging in my Manhattan penthouse. "I'm comfortable like this," I replied. "Well, comfort matters," she conceded, though her glance suggested she meant especially when you can't afford better. From the dining table my father lowered his newspaper, his forehead creased with concern. "You know, Evie, I heard consulting work has been slow lately, if you need help." "I'm fine, Dad," I said evenly, sinking into a chair and sliding my phone halfway from my bag. 2 missed calls from my assistant Daniel, likely updates on the final transfer of the mortgage firm we just absorbed. Claire smoothed the sleeve of her emerald dress, catching the firelight on her diamond bracelet. "Speaking of fine," she purred, "Marcus really outdid himself this year. Show her, darling." With a dramatic flourish, Marcus opened a small black velvet box. Inside gleamed a platinum watch, encrusted with tiny diamonds. "Matches the cufflinks from our trip to Paris," he said proudly. "It's beautiful," I offered, thinking of the timepiece collection in my vault that could rival any luxury showroom. "Oh?" Claire tilted her head, eyes narrowing with a faux innocent smile. "And what about you, Evelyn? Any special gifts this year? Or are we doing the homemade thing again?" The room stilled. Last year, I'd given them all hand-carved walnut picture frames, not because I couldn't afford more, but because I'd made them myself during weekends at my lake house. They had, of course, interpreted it as a sign that I was strapped for cash. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Daniel lit up the screen. "Urgent. Crestline mortgage acquisition complete. Full ownership transferred. Their board wants to meet you. You now own their loan portfolio." I froze, my eyes still on the fire, then slowly looked up at my family. Crestline Mortgage wasn't just any acquisition. Its portfolio covered most of the high-end properties in this part of Colorado, including, I scrolled down Daniel's message, 414877. Aspen Ridge Road, my father and Patricia's lodge. And there it was again, 23 Sterling Hollow Drive, Marcus and Claire's overdecorated mountain chateau. "Actually," I said evenly, "I did something rather nice for myself this year." Patricia perked up, her tone falsely bright. "Oh, a new winter coat? Or maybe you finally upgraded your car?" "Something bigger," I replied, skimming the rest of Daniel's update. Marcus chuckled. "Let me guess, you finally landed that senior consultant title you've been chasing for years?" I smiled faintly, remembering the day I'd quietly purchased the consulting firm they still believed I worked for. They had no idea I'd been signing their annual corporate Christmas bonuses for the past 2 years. "Not exactly," I said, just as my phone began to ring. "Excuse me," I stepped into the hallway. Daniel's voice was bubbling with excitement. "Miss Hale, congratulations. You now own their houses, both of them. Shall I send the updated property portfolio?" I glanced back into the great room, where Marcus was busy angling Claire's wrist so everyone could admire her bracelet under the chandelier. "Perfect timing," I said. "Yes, send everything. I think it's time for a little, holiday transparency." When I returned, the annual tradition of praising Claire's elaborate Christmas decorations was in full swing. Crystal ornaments shimmered on the 12-foot spruce, probably worth more than what they assumed I earned in a quarter. Evelyn, Patricia called out. Who was that? Hopefully not a bill collector. Her attempt at humor made Marcus snort. Actually, I said, settling back into my armchair and opening the file Daniel had sent. It was my assistant confirming a purchase. Marcus's brow furrowed. Since when does a junior consultant have an assistant? Dad folded his newspaper, frowning. Evie, you're not taking on debt, are you? You know what I've always said. The debt is the devil's handcuffs, I finished for him. Yes, Dad, I remember, just like I remember the lecture about my modest career choices 3 Christmases ago. Claire smoothed her skirt and leaned forward. Well, someone has to say it. We're concerned about you, living in that tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. Interesting assumption, I said, swiping to a highlighted PDF on my tablet. Tell me, Claire, how's the mortgage on Sterling Hollow Drive? Still paying that 4.8% interest? Her smile twitched. How do you know that? I turned to my father. And Dad, remember that refinance you did last spring with Crestline Mortgage? The one that kept you up at night? Dad straightened. That's private financial information. Not anymore, I said, sliding the tablet onto the coffee table for all of them to see. On the screen, 2 property titles gleamed in bold type. Owner of record, Evelyn Grace Hale. If you want to see exactly what happened when I told my family the truth and their reaction when they realized I owned their homes, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Not to the owner of Crestline Mortgage, I said quietly, turning my tablet so they could see the acquisition documents. I glanced at my watch. 43 minutes ago, I own the company that holds all your mortgages. The silence that followed was absolute. Just the crackle of the fire in the stone hearth. Claire's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for her wineglass. That's impossible, Marcus finally sputtered. Crestline is a multi-billion-dollar lender. Was, I corrected. Now it's part of Hale Strategic Holdings, along with several other companies you might recognize. Patricia's face had gone pale. Hale Strategic. But, that's my company, I said with a small nod. The one I built while you all thought I was just struggling along as a mid-level consultant. Turns out those long hours weren't about chasing promotions. Marcus stood abruptly. This is absurd. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Do I? I unlocked my phone and held up a photo gallery. I own the entire building. I keep that 1-bedroom unit for appearances. My real home is the penthouse across the top 3 floors. Patricia blinked rapidly. But all those handmade gifts? Because I enjoy making them, I said simply. Not everyone needs to scream their net worth from the rooftops. Marcus glanced at his phone, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock. She's telling the truth. Evelyn Grace Hale? Hale Strategic is all over the financial press. The quiet buyouts, the tech sector expansions. He looked up slowly. You're that Evelyn Hale. Dad's hands shook as he picked up the tablet and scanned the mortgage documents. All this time, while we were offering to help you, I was building an empire, I finished for him. One that now includes every major mortgage and investment firm in this region, including the one that finances your commercial developments, Marcus. Claire sank back onto the couch, the sapphire bracelet on her wrist catching the firelight. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked softly. 3 Christmases ago, you all laughed when I said I was working on something big. You decided what my limits were without ever asking what I was capable of. The room was still, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. I kept my success quiet because I didn't need your approval. But now? I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes. Now you understand exactly who you've been underestimating. The fire popped sharply, as if punctuating my words. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, silent and steady. Just like the way I'd built everything they now depended on. And this was only the beginning. 2 years ago, you suggested I should try teaching instead of wasting time in finance, I said, my voice steady. Last year, Mom cried because she thought I couldn't afford a proper winter coat. The crystal snowflakes dangling from the 12-foot spruce cast rainbow shadows across their stunned faces as I continued. I learned something important from this family. Money isn't about sapphire rings or oversized holiday centerpieces. It's about leverage, about power. I let my gaze sweep the room, taking in Marcus's diamond-studded watch, Claire's bracelet, Patricia's imported centerpiece. And while you were all busy showing off your luxuries, I was quietly buying the companies that finance them. My phone buzzed again. Daniel sending through more acquisition details. Before I could check, Mom spoke, her voice unusually small. What happens now, with our mortgages? I looked at each of them in turn. Marcus, who'd mocked my career choice. Claire, who'd patronized me at every turn. My father, who'd been convinced I was wasting my potential. Now, I said with a slow smile, reaching for the plain brown gift bag at my feet, we opened presents. But first, let's talk about those interest rates. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 as the room settled into a heavy silence. Their eggnog sat untouched, the nutmeg scent mingling with the sharp pine from the tree. Mom kept glancing between me and the Crestline mortgage documents glowing on my tablet, as though one of them might blink out of existence. I don't understand, Marcus said finally, twisting his watch around his wrist. If you're this successful, why pretend you were struggling? I took a slow sip of my eggnog. Remember when you first started in real estate, Marcus? You told everyone exactly how much you made on each sale. He shifted uncomfortably. That was different. I was establishing myself. No, I said gently. You were showing off, and I watched how people reacted, presenting your success, or worse, trying to use it. So I tried something different. Dad's voice carried more confusion than anger. By lying to your family? By observing, I corrected. Do you know how many deals I've closed because people underestimated me? How many companies I've acquired because their CEOs thought I was just another mid-level consultant? I smiled faintly. Even Crestline never saw me coming until the ink was dry. Claire's phone chimed, but it was Thomas who broke the silence, staring at his own screen. Traits magazine calls you the ghost of Wall Street, the invisible billionaire who built an empire without anyone noticing. Billionaire? Mom nearly dropped her mug. I tapped my tablet, pulling up Hale Strategic's current valuation. The number glowed across the screen. More than enough to make Marcus's mountain chateau look like a rental cabin. But your apartment, Mom began. It's a cover, I finished. Just like the modest clothes, the practical car, the entire image I've crafted, it kept people from seeing me as a threat until I was too big to ignore. Outside, the snow kept falling. Silent, relentless. Just like me. The real me? I said, leaning back in the armchair. Let's just say my art collection alone is worth more than both your houses combined. Claire's eyes darted to Marcus, but it was Marcus who reacted first, pushing himself up from the couch. I need some air. Sit down, Marcus, I said firmly. We're not finished. He hesitated, then lowered himself back down. Remember last Christmas, I continued, when you made that little joke about my bargain bin watch? Marcus shifted, his jaw tightening. I pulled back my sleeve, letting the light catch the understated gleam of the watch beneath. This is a Patek Philippe, worth more than your house. I bought it the day after you made that comment, and then kept wearing the old Timex just to see what else you'd say. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. Why are you telling us this now? I reached for my phone, scrolling to the latest acquisition update from Daniel. Because as of today, Hale Strategic doesn't just own your mortgages, we've also acquired controlling interests in the regional bank where you've worked for 30 years, Dad. The same bank that passed you over for CEO last month. His face paled. You mean? The board meeting is January 3rd, I confirmed. They'll be announcing a new CEO. Care to guess who? The only sounds were the clink of melting ice in abandoned glasses and the faint hiss of the fire. All those Sunday dinners, Mom whispered. All those lectures about success, about following Marcus's example, were incredibly enlightening, I said. Nothing teaches you about human nature quite like being underestimated by your own family. I stood, smoothing my sweater, hand-knitted cashmere that cost more than Marcus's monthly mortgage payment. Now, about those presents. From my tote, I pulled out small cream-colored envelopes, handing one to each of them. Consider this your real Christmas gift, I said. Inside are your new mortgage terms, 0 interest, principal reduced by half. They stared at me as if I'd handed them a live grenade. Why? Marcus asked finally, suspicion and gratitude warring in his tone. Because I owe you a thank you, I said evenly, for teaching me the value of invisibility, for showing me that real power isn't in what you flaunt, but in what you quietly build while no one's watching. Thomas frowned. So, all those years? Every time you mocked my small career, every time you paraded your luxuries, you pushed me to work harder, grow stronger, and climb higher, I said. You were fuel, and you never even realized it. Mom's tears slipped freely now, Dad's arm curling around her shoulders. Marcus stared at the watch on my wrist as though it were a symbol of everything he'd misunderstood. The company holiday gala is next week, I added casually. Black tie, at Hale Tower downtown. You've probably seen it, the glass building with my name on it. Recognition flickered across their faces. You're all invited, I said. Might be a good time to meet the real Evelyn Hale. My phone buzzed again. Daniel, confirming the bank transition details. I slipped it back into my bag and stood. Where are you going? Mom asked, her voice small. Home, I said. The penthouse, not the cover apartment. I've got calls to make. Time zones wait for no one when you're running a global empire. I paused at the door and looked back one last time. Oh, and Marcus? That bracelet you bought Claire last spring? Check which company financed the purchase. You might recognize the owner. The room was frozen, no one speaking. Outside, my driver stood beside the Bentley. Kept out of sight during family visits. Oh, Miss Hale? It's Evelyn, I said, sliding into the back seat. And call Daniel. Tell him to start the paperwork for acquiring Marcus's development company? I smiled faintly. Consider it my New Year's gift to myself. After all, what's Christmas without a few surprises? Snow fell harder now, covering the lodge in silence. Inside, I imagined the family still sitting there, staring at those envelopes, wondering how they'd never seen me coming. If you've been following my story, you know I didn't get here by being the loudest in the room or by flaunting every success. I built quietly, strategically, and often in the shadow of people who underestimated me. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in my place tonight? Would you have revealed everything, or kept the mask on a little longer? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and your insight shapes where this story goes next. And if you believe in what I stand for, quiet strength, resilience, and turning doubt into fuel, then hit that subscribe button. Not just to follow my journey, but to join a community of people who know success isn't about showing off. It's about building something solid enough that you never have to explain yourself. Here's my advice. Never confuse being underestimated with being powerless. Let their doubt be your camouflage while you do the work they'll never see coming. Protect your vision, play the long game, and remember, silence isn't weakness, it's a strategy. When you finally speak, make sure it's with proof no one can deny.